when it stops me from being adored. Pulling on our strings that I will when I'm scared. I let go, but I can't. If I found out that they were true, then I wouldn't know about you. I wouldn't know about you. Pulling on our strings that I will when I'm scared. I let go, but I can't. If I found out that they were true, then I wouldn't know about you. I wouldn't know about you. I don't want it. No, I never wanted my problems. I never started the beginnings, but I fall and I stop. I know I want you, but I never wanted any problems. Never asked for the feelings that seem to come up. Oh no, I want it. No, I don't want it. No, I don't need it. I never wanted any problems. Yeah. I don't want it. No, I don't need it. No, I don't want it. No, I never wanted any. Pulling on all the strings that I hold when I'm scared. I let go, but I can't. If I found out that they were true, then I wouldn't know about you. I wouldn't know about you.
Good morning. How's everybody doing? This song is called The Day That I Met You. So here I go again, right from the start. Trying to figure out who you are. This road is spinning out of control. I need you to look into my soul. Tell me, what shall you say? Everything I thought that I knew just went crashing through the window. The day that I met you. So turn the key and let's take a drive. I never felt so low. This road is spinning out of control. I need you to look into my soul. Tell me, what shall you say? Everything I thought that I knew just went crashing through the window. The day that I met you. The day that I met you was off the silver screen. The day that I met you was a sight unseen. my friend, we meet again. It's been a while, where should we begin? Feels like forever. Within my heart are memories of perfect love that you gave to me. Oh, I remember when you are with me. I'm free, I'm careless, I believe. Above all the others will fly. This brings tears to my eyes, my sacrifice. You've seen our shares of ups and downs. Oh, how quickly life can turn around. In an instant, it feels so good to reunite within yourself, within your mind. Let's find peace there when you are with me. I'm free, I'm careless, I believe. Above all the others will fly. This brings tears to my eyes, my sacrifice. I just called to say hello again. And I just called to say hello again. 'Cause when you are with me, I'm free, I'm careless, I believe. Above all the others will fly. This brings tears to my eyes, my sacrifice. My sacrifice. So this next song I wrote, and thanks to Kate Jones for joining me this morning. So when you get,
Thank you for having me.
I gave her like a week's notice because I thought Creed sounded really good with a violin. So, but thank you, Kate. Definitely.
Thanks for having me.
This next song I wrote, and it goes right along with the sermon series this month of In God We Trust. And I know most artists say, I wrote this song during COVID, but I actually wrote it before COVID. During COVID, I didn't do anything. So, but it really kind of deals with my, my anxiety that things start happening in life, and I start getting very overwhelmed with what's going on, that's where I have to stop and tell myself, you know what, like, God is in control of my life, and I need to let go and give it to Him. And in the one lyric, it says there's joy in letting go. It's just kind of releasing and letting God take over. And that's usually when the things that I'm stressing out about seem to happen. Like as soon as I let go and just give it to God, the things that I stress about just kind of, it all happens. God's timing is not always our timing. So. The song's called Higher. my time? When will it be my place to stop and show the world who I am and what it takes to rise above, to live out loud, to stop and take a look at where you came from and be proud? Should I hurry up? Should I take my time? This life goes by so fast. Should I just be happy with what is mine? But I know that I was meant for more. Just show me that open door. Can weakness be overcome? Should I just accept what I became? In a crowded room, I'm still lonesome, and in the emptiness, I'm still the same. I've fallen down so many times. You'd think I'd be used to it by now. And they say, stand between the lines and you'll be fine. Play the actor and take a bow. But I know that I was meant for more. Just show me that open door. And I will rise up, get what I know, release what I'm holding on to. There's a joy in letting go, and I will climb higher without looking back. Stack the cards higher. Yeah, I'm alright with that, 'cause I know now I was meant for more. And you showed me that open door. So I will rise up, forget what I know, release what I'm holding on to. There's a joy in letting go, and I will climb higher without looking back. Stack the cards higher. Yeah, I'm alright with that. Yeah, I'm alright with that.
All right, anybody else feel like you just saw the birth of like a duo that I think we need to see more of that, guys.
I told her she screwed up by agreeing to it, so I'm going to use it.
I'm sorry, Kate. I think you're going to need to just walk next to Mike from now on, wherever he's at, because that was amazing. Thank you so much. So much. Hey, I want to talk to you before we really get started talking about In God We Trust, which, by the way, we still do, no matter what. But I want to talk to you about board games. For some reason, I don't have a lot of memories of growing up. Maybe that's a good thing, or maybe I've just forgotten everything. But I have a really vivid and sort of warm memories about playing board games with my brothers and sisters. There were 7 of us, so that's a good thing about big, poor farm families. You know, you always have someone to play a game with. And I've told you before, my dad was sort of poor and really good at finding bootleg games from China or Korea or wherever they were from. So we always had weird games, and I would go, hey, you remember playing Hawaii Five-0? And everybody's like, no, we do not. But we did have some real games, you know, some big-time games like Monopoly. We had those. But I just remember like playing board games, especially in the winter, and how great it was. But I also remember the arguments. You remember the arguments when you would play board games as a kid? You know how everybody would try to, well, let's call it getting an advantage, but maybe cheating, like the guy who, and I won't mention names, who would roll their die off the table. And then if you realize, like, if they liked the number on the floor, they would keep it. And if they didn't, they would re-roll it. You're like, you can't do it both ways. We've either got to find the dice and look at it, or you can't re-roll it twice and get 2 rolls every time. And then it's like in Monopoly especially, like, and I'm still this way. When I play Monopoly, like, you roll any number from anywhere, and my brain just computes where you're at. So don't go saying you're going to wind up on Park Place and collect the pot when you should be on Illinois Avenue. No, 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 no. You know, so it would be those kind of fights. Like, people are like, oh, I thought that was 8. You know, I've suddenly forgot how to count to 8 all of a sudden. And there were, you know, I picked up 2 community chests. And what I'm saying is my brothers and sisters were cheaters. No, I'm not saying that. You know, it's like somebody's got a Dungeons and Dragons die with 16 sides. You're like, I don't think that. And then someone else has another Monopoly game from a yard sale, and they're just pulling money out of their pockets all the time. And God knows you don't want one of my sisters to run the bank. But here's the thing about that. I was thinking about that this week. Like, those things will happen, right? Like, there's going to be arguments when you're playing a game, especially if you're related. But there's a certain point. There's a certain point, like, if everybody's cheating, the game is over, right? Like, somebody's going to flip the table. Somebody's going to flip the table if everybody's cheating. It's just not fun anymore. As much as you and I hate rules, as much as you and I want to bend the rules or make up our own rules, none of us want to play a board game with no rules. I think there's an Office episode like that where Kevin was playing the game of Dallas, and he just kept making up rules, and all of a sudden it's no fun and nobody wants to play, and somebody's going to flip the table because that's the way life is. And I just want to tell you this week, and we're not talking politics during this, even though we're in a political season, but I'm going to use an example that's ripped from the headlines. If this was a crime drama, we'd go, da-da, ripped from the headlines. Because I had that moment this week where I went, oh, I don't think there are any rules anymore. And it happened around this. Did anybody notice this story? The story of Amy Coney Barrett Jackson. I like the car show, or I like the car auction, so I call her that. But Amy Coney Barrett Jackson is up for Supreme Court. And one of the senators called her on she said that she would not discriminate against someone because of their sexual, not persuasion. No, it wasn't even orientation. Preference. There we go. I was like, it's in the story, and I can't remember the word. I am getting old. But she said she wouldn't discriminate against sexual preference. And one of the senators said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, like, how dare you use that word? That's an old, outdated word, and it's hateful, and you can't use that anymore. And at the same time, even though people had used that the week before on the Senate floor, at the same time, and this is the first time that this has ever happened due to technology and due the dictionary, Merriam-Webster dictionary online, was changing the definition to say that was, discriminatory to be used. And I'll be honest, like, as I was hearing that, I thought it was one of those things like, all right, Ben Shapiro, I'm sure that I really had that thought, like, this can't be happening. I mean, this isn't real. Like, they don't change the dictionary right after a hearing just so that they can make someone wrong. I mean, that would just be to the point where there are no rules, right? Like, there's no rules if you can change the dictionary based on. And then I started looking around, and I was like, oh no, I think this really happened, and I don't know about you, but the way I judge that, and I've told you I do this in the morning, like every morning I read, like, it would sound smarter if I said newspapers, but there are no newspapers, but I basically read, 5 or 6 different websites all the way across the spectrum, and it's interesting because they all have the same stories, just completely different outcomes. But I also have learned something else, and you should try this. Read to the end of the story. It usually has the fact at the very last thing. They literally have a headline, and then if you will read far enough, you will find the fact. And then they go, we had the fact in there. It's like, yeah, and you work really hard to hide it, all of you. But anyway, I was like, did this really happen? And it turns out, as far as I can tell, people agree that it did happen. That there was sort of this dust up on the Senate floor, and this senator said, you can't use that, that's offensive. And then immediately the dictionary changed the word to be offensive, and their excuse, Merriam-Webster's staff excuse was, well, we had a backlog of changes we needed to make and just totally coincidental, like we saw a lot of hits and decided to change it, because you have to go back and turn a crank to change. It's like, no, that's not how websites work. We don't believe you. And so I just wanted to talk to you this morning about a world where I feel like if we were playing a board game, we'd be about at the place that we would flip the table and just go, this isn't fun anymore. Like, there are no rules. And guys, this is why debates don't work. This is why you're not sure whether you should wear a mask or not. This is why none of the normal things, this is why. When's the last time you believed an expert model? And I'm not talking about like someone who's a clothing model and she's an expert. I mean, like, I'd be more likely to believe a runway model than a model right now, a scientific model. And this is why when people go, you should just listen to the science, you go, well, which science? This is why nothing seems to work right now. Because we've got to the tipping point, I think, where just anything goes. We change the rules. There's no integrity and there's nothing that we can really even, it's like, I would have thought that when we had this much information in our pocket, like, arguments would be over, right? Because you just Google it. Like, I remember, speaking of my brothers and sisters, like, we would get in an argument when, and as we had off-brand board games, we also had, we had a set of encyclopedias from, I think, pre-World War II. They were from the 30s. So there wasn't a lot of information, but like, you could get in an argument about something and it'd go on for decades because you would just argue about it because but now it seems like you go, well, I can just Google it, I can just find out. But we don't even agree on that because two people can actually ask for the same information and get a different answer on their phone. And so, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Well, here, I have great news for you this morning. And it goes back to this thing that we've been talking about all month long. This verse that on one hand is just one of the most inspiring verses in the world. And I don't want to downplay it because I believe this to be true for all of us. If you're a Christian this morning, if you're a follower of Jesus, I think these words still apply. Even though they were to the Israelites and even though this is Old Testament, God has plans for you. And they're good plans. I know the plans I have you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you. And this has been my experience as a Christian. And plans to give you hope in the future. And I love, love, love what Mike said about his song because that song gets to me because it's so true. Like, God does have amazing plans, but as we've talked about all month long, they're not exactly in the time frame we would like necessarily. Because in this case, this is a story and kind of the behind the scenes, and I'm not going to read this morning, but you can see it up here behind me, is we love to pull out that one sort of, Bible verse that you see on Facebook, and it's super inspiring. I know the plans I have for you. But he was speaking to people who were going to live in captivity for 70 years. Basically, that weren't going to come out alive out of being ripped out of their home country. Like, they had seen their country, Israel, God's chosen people, the ones who marched out of Egypt. They were slaves, and God marched them out of Egypt, and that should have been included them because, he did rescue them from slavery 400 years after they were enslaved. So that might have been included them, but like, they march out of Egypt, they're God's chosen people, they take over this whole land that he promised them. Just the underdog story of underdog stories. They became very wealthy, very powerful. They became a world force. And like most organizations or countries or empires, they screwed up. They got soft. They didn't obey God anymore. And God warned them. God sent prophets. God said, I cannot bless you if you act like this. It's kind of like your parents would say to you, like, somebody's going to get hurt. You keep doing that, somebody's going to get hurt. And then my parents would say, take it outside. I don't know. You could do anything outside, apparently. But anyway, like, God would say, like, you're going to get hurt. This is not going to work out. And nobody listened, nobody listened, nobody listened. And then eventually, exactly what God predicted through the prophets happens. And Nebuchadnezzar comes in, and Babylon comes in, and the armies come and knock down their walls and destroy their temple, which is just unbelievable to them. Like, that's God's house. Like, how is God allowing God's house to get robbed? Basically, God's house got robbed because Nebuchadnezzar comes in with his army, knocks down the city, knocks down the temple, steals all the gold and leaves town. And takes all the best people, which is kind of like a dual-sided thing. It's like you're like, oh, I didn't get captured. Wait a minute. Like you're wondering why he didn't take you because you were not the best. And you might go, well, some of the people got to stay behind. Oh, yes, they did. They got to stay behind in a ruined country. Like talk about no infrastructure. Like their trees have been cut down because Nebuchadnezzar just destroyed the land when he went across it on purpose. And so there's sort of like this bedraggled few living in the land, and the best and the brightest, sort of anybody who had any cultural value, is taken back to Babylon. And God says, I have a plan for you, and it's a good plan. You can trust me. It's a great plan, and you're going to be happy that you follow it, and I want you to have hope for your future. But by the way, you're going to be in the land for 70 years. And then he said, then you will call on me. And you will come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. And you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. And I will be found by you. And I will bring you back from captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations and places where I have banished you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back to the place from which I have carried you into exile. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about this. And it's such a cool thing. God gave them sort of this checklist, and we're not going to read through it today for time. But God gave them a checklist of things to do while they're in the land. He's like, you're going to be in the land for 70 years, so build houses, build stuff. Like, don't just sort of resist Nebuchadnezzar because you're going to live and die in the land of Babylon. And plant stuff. He's like, plant fields and plant vineyards and eat the fruit and drink the wine and like get settled down. Like, take on long-term projects and develop roots. And then he even said, marry, and have babies. My goodness, have lots of babies and have grandchildren and get your kids married. And he's like, I want there to be more people in Babylon than there were in Israel. He said, like, I want you to increase and not decrease. And then he said, live prosperous, peaceful lives, which is pretty interesting. You've been captured by another country. Like, your instinct is to, well, let's fight this thing the whole time. I mean, that seems like the right thing to do. And God's like, no, this is supposed to happen. And like we talked about last week, it's sort of like you have a 70-year lease. Like, take care of the place because you're going to live here for a while. Even though it's not yours, even though you're building your dream home, don't, you better take care of the carpet and beware, like don't knock holes in the drywall because you're going to live here for a very long time. And then he said something. He said, pray for your city. And I love that because I think that's so good for us today to think as exiles. Like, he said, because if your city is prosperous, you'll be prosperous. So make sure you pray for your city. So he basically lays out this whole thing, this whole idea, which I think is so valuable. We've talked about it for 2 weeks. Like, you're going to be in Babylon for a long time. You're in exile, sure. This is not your country. And you didn't even want to be here. But here's the thing. I have a plan for you to prosper even now, but wait, you're going to get out of this, but here's the thing. I want you to pray for your city, and I want you to be a blessing even in the time you're in when you didn't choose it. Now, the last item is the one we're going to talk about today because I think it'll help us in this world where it seems like anything goes, where you can't believe anything you read. Or at least like me, you have to read it 37 places and cross-check and make sure. Because sort of everybody's got an angle, it seems. And it seems like, none of the normal things, I don't know if anybody's noticed, like none of the normal things work because without truth, if you can just change the definition in the middle of the argument, not that much fun to play anymore. And so the last thing he said to him, he said, don't believe the liars. Don't believe the false prophets. He's like, they're not speaking for me. Like, they're telling you things that aren't true. Now, I want to go back one chapter. And I want to read you something today, and I want you to keep in mind sort of what I've told you so far. Like, that's their situation. They're in a land, like they're captive, but God's going, you're going to be there for 70 years. And by the way, this is not some random act. Like, I've told you, I've warned you. Like, this is the thing where I've told you, you kids are going to get hurt. Stop it. Stop jumping on the bed. Stop jumping on the couch. Whatever you're doing in there, I know it. Take it outside. Like, you can't do that. You're going to get hurt. And sure enough, that's what they do. And so Jeremiah 28 has something different. This is the story of what the false prophet said. Because I got interested in that. I'm like, he keeps telling us not to listen or telling them not to listen to the false prophets. So I want to read to you. I'm just going to take the time this morning to kind of read to you what the prophets were saying, and it's pretty interesting. So in the 5th month of the same year, the 4th year, early in the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah, the prophet Hananiah, so we're naming names here. This is a prophet, a well-known prophet, son of Azur, who was from Gibeon. So this is not some mythical figure. This is a guy everybody knows. He's writing about someone everyone knows. Said to me, Jeremiah, in the house of the Lord, in the presence of the priests and all the people, so in church, basically, this is what the Lord God Almighty, the God of Israel, says. I will break the yoke of the king of Babylon, and within 2 years I'll bring back to this place all the articles of the Lord's house that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, removed and took to Babylon. I will also bring back to this place Jehoiakim, son of Jehoiakim. Wow, you guys should name your kids differently. King of Judah, and all the other exiles from Judah who went to Babylon, declares the Lord. For I will break the yoke of the king of Babylon. So think about this, like we have two models. You just heard, and I've been talking about for 2 weeks, the model that Jeremiah is saying. Like, this is God. I have great plans for you. And you should have hope for your future because everything's going to be okay. But you're going to stay in the land of Babylon for 70 years. And then you're going to come back and you're going to be richer and you're going to be more of you. And you're going to have money. Like, you're literally going to come back prosperous. That's what's going to happen. But you have to settle down and build houses. And here's this other guy, this other prophet saying, no. This is what God says. God says in 2 years, Babylon's going to be destroyed. All of the stuff's coming back and everybody's going to come marching back. And we're going to rebuild Jerusalem. You ever feel like that now when you see, I mean, like, we even forget how many models we've seen just for the COVID virus. Like, I stood on this stage, at the very beginning going, man, I think, millions might die and over, because that was the information I had. And everybody's going to know someone who died and we need to prepare for, I didn't know any different, obviously. I was just going off the models we'd been giving. And so imagine that's the same world they're in. Like they're in the same world where they're giving two completely competing models where Jeremiah's going, here's what God says, you're going to live and die in Babylon. And Hananiah is going, nope, 2 years back to business as usual. And so who do you trust? This is the interesting thing. Like, we live in a world where you can't trust the dictionary because it might change overnight. But they had sort of an equally difficult task, didn't they? Because we have two guys going, God told me. God told me two completely different things. Like, so who do you trust? I mean, who do you trust when everybody says different, when everybody's an expert, and when somebody's lying? It's the stupid or liar game. Is this person stupid or are they a liar? Ask that to yourself. I ask that occasionally when I'm talking to someone or I hear something. Are they stupid or are they lying? Do they really believe this or are they lying? I don't know. But that's sort of this. So who can you trust? Well, I'm going to tell you what I will always tell you. Trust God. But that doesn't feel super helpful right now, does it? Because we're talking about two prophets. And this wasn't some, a guy who walked in muttering to himself. They're like, we've never seen. It's like, no, this is a prophet of God giving his expert opinion that we'll be back in 2 years, back in business, everything. The king's coming back. The gold's coming back. The temple's going to be rebuilt. Everybody's walking back. It'll be fine. Babylon's destroyed in 2 years. And Jeremiah, other prophets going, no, not at all. In fact, we'll find out later that Jeremiah is like a prophet / prop comic because he's been wearing a yoke around his neck like a ox would wear in the field to show that they were in bondage, which had to be really hard to get through doors. I don't know, like must have had wider doors back then or go sideways because he's been wearing a yoke this whole time. So anyway, the story goes on. Then the prophet Jeremiah replied to the prophet Hananiah before the priests and all the people who were standing. So in church, in the temple, Jeremiah says something pretty interesting. He says, amen. May the Lord do so. May the Lord fulfill the words you have prophesied by bringing the articles of the Lord's house and all the exiles back to this place in Babylon. Nevertheless, from Babylon. Nevertheless, listen to what I have to say to you in the hearing all the people. From early times, the prophets who preceded you and me have prophesied war and disaster and plague against many countries and great kingdoms. But the prophet who prophesies peace will be recognized as one truly sent by the Lord only if his prediction comes true. And that's a very interesting point, isn't it? What he said is, I hope you're right. I had this conversation with a friend of mine who's voting the opposite way of me in November. And we're having it was a nice conversation. It was a little heated, but I said, I hope you're right. I really do. Like, and that's what people forget. Like, I live here. Like, you're telling me my life's going to be better because of what and I hope you're right. Like, I really do, because that would be great. Everything you're saying sounds great. And that's what he's saying. Like, I'm not against everybody coming back in 2 years. I'm not against Babylon being destroyed. I don't like them much. I hope God does what you're saying. I'm willing to be wrong, like, because I hope you're right, because that sounds fantastic. But he said, the prophet who prophesies peace is recognized as truly from the Lord if it comes true. Kind of what Jesus said. Jesus said, wisdom is known by its outcomes. He's like, you know what? And it sounds a little complicated, but basically what he's saying is, like, if you prophesy war, I mean, that's sort of like predicting rain with no end date. Like, it's going to happen. Like, I predict in York County it's going to rain. No end date. It's going to happen, right? Same thing with war. Like, I predict, and if you ever watch psychics, not that I do, but like any psychic prediction for the year, they always come out the first of the year. Like, I predict there will be conflict somewhere in the world. You're like, I'm betting you're right. Like, it would be a weird year if there's no conflict. Like, I get that, you know. I predict there will be a forest fire in the West. Like, yeah, I get that. But he said, you know what? If you predict peace, if you predict that we're going to be back in 2 years and Babylon, the largest, most powerful empire, is going to be destroyed in 2 years, oh, you better be right, because we're going to know. And that's true, isn't it? And he also referenced the fact that the standard for prophets was, if you're wrong, you die. That's the standard God set up, which I think is a fair but firm, you know. Like, if you predict something and it doesn't come true, if you say you're predicting for God, if you're hearing from God, God's never wrong, so if you're wrong, you die. Which would make weather forecasting different too, I think. But maybe that's a little too strong. But like, if you're wrong, you die. So it says, then the prophet Hananiah took the yoke off the neck of the prophet Jeremiah. So prop comedy is going awry here. Off the neck of the prophet Jeremiah, and broke it. He's like, look at me, you know, and breaks it over his knee, and said before all the people, this is what the Lord says. In the same way, I will break the yoke of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, off the neck of all the nations within 2 years. And at this, prophet Jeremiah went on his way. And it's sort of like that Kip Dynamite moment where Napoleon says, this is probably the worst film in the world. And he said, how could you possibly know that? And so we have that same moment like here where he's like made this bold prediction. And here's the thing. I'm going to tell you what actually happened, because we have the benefit of history. Who could possibly know? That's the thing about predictions like that. And that's the same thing. I mean, I think that's a big problem that you and I have, is in this world where the dictionary can change, in this world where we get completely different reports depending on what news outlet or what Twitter feed we follow. I mean, I've had this conversation with people where I'm saying, if I had the same information as you and I believed it, I would probably think like you do. The difference is not that I'm thinking that much different than you. I'm just trusting completely different information than you. Like, I don't think what you're saying based on what you say is true, and you don't think and it's the same thing I had with this deal this week of going, did they really change the dictionary during a Senate hearing so that it would make this person wrong, even though it didn't say that before? That can't be true. As far as I know now, and I believe it to be true, it's like, yeah, that happened. And so we're in a situation sort of like they were. And the fact that you've got two completely contradicting models from two sort of reputable individuals, both claiming to hear from God, which is a pretty good source, and no way to know which way to go, right? No way to know, because you're not going to find out for 2 years if Babylon falls, or 70 years if Jeremiah is right. And Jeremiah even said, I hope you're right because I like yours better than mine. So what do you do in the meantime? Because it does matter, right? It's not, oh, well, we'll just find out. This doesn't really matter. Oh, it matters. Like, if Babylon's going to be overthrown in 2 years, you definitely don't want to plant vineyards and fields in Babylon, right? That's kind of dumb. That's a waste. You don't want to pray for the city to succeed. They're supposed to fail. You don't want to, like, get married in Babylon because you're going to have this long journey home. You want to put everything on hold. You want to resist. You don't want to settle down like Jeremiah says. You want to do the opposite of what Jeremiah. You definitely don't want to build houses. Why would you build a house in Babylon if you're just going to turn around and leave within 18 months to 2 years? And now here's what actually happened. We know this from the prophet, and we know this from history. The fact that Babylon, that was the most amazing empire of its time, unbeatable, was beaten. Guess what they did? They got soft, and they lost their integrity. Somebody flipped the board over because guess what? Cyrus came in. Cyrus from the Medes and the Persians. And he destroyed them. And then the unthinkable happened. I mean, check this out. The unthinkable happened. Like Cyrus takes over the world. And for some strange reason, he gets this thought. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm, and also to put it in writing. And this sounds like a Star Trek story or some sort of in a land far, far. It sounds like no. This we know. We know that Persia beat Babylon at this time. This is a real thing from history. So this is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says, and we know that the Jews did go back to the land. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him in Jerusalem, in Judah. And any of his people among you may go up to Jerusalem and Judah and build the temple of the Lord, the God of Israel, and the God who is in Jerusalem. And may their God be with them. And in any locality where the survivors may now be living, listen to this. The people are to provide them with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with free will offerings. He's like got a GoFundMe to send them home 70 years later to rebuild their temple, just like Jeremiah said, just like God said through the. So we know what happened. Like, okay, so Jeremiah was right and Hananiah very wrong. In fact, the truth is Hananiah dies. All right, this has not happened yet today. I thought we were on a roll here, but it's only because I need to read a scripture, and then I'll just have to guess what it says, which would be fun. Can you advance that slide? All right, let's read it, and I'll wait for this to come back up. It says, then the prophet Jeremiah said to Hananiah the prophet, listen, Hananiah, the Lord has not sent you, yet you have persuaded this nation to trust in lies. And I am about to remove you from the face of the earth. This very year you are going to die because you have preached rebellion against the Lord. In the 7th month of the same year, Hananiah the prophet died. So Jeremiah makes another prediction, a pretty important prediction. He says, it might be someone in between us actually, makes a pretty important, he's like, you're wrong and you're going to die, and he didn't wait for 2 years to see if it was true. Hananiah died that same year, and Jeremiah's completely right. Not that you want to be right about that one, but that's what happened. And it followed the sort of prediction that had always happened, that if you're wrong and you say you're from God, like you can be wrong in your prediction, you can be wrong in your models, but if you say God told you and you're wrong, well, obviously you were lying, so you're dead. And so if you put that next slide up there, he said, you have convinced, listen, think about this. He said, here's the 2 things you've done, Hananiah. It wasn't just that you made some sort of like rosy prediction. I'm not mad at you because your model is wrong. He said, you persuaded this nation to believe in lies. Like, you've persuaded this nation to believe in lies at a time when it's very important they don't. Like, it's very important that for their safety, for their future, they need to settle down in Babylon. They need to get comfortable. They need to build infrastructure. They need to build homes. Like, all of these things are so important if you believe they're going to be there for 70 years, and you're telling them to do the opposite. That's so dangerous. Thank you, Mitch. And then he also said something that seems a little like, why is that true? He said, you've sort of preached, in fact, didn't say sort of, that's me. He said, you have preached rebellion against God. You've rebelled, caused them to rebel against God. And here's why he said that. He said that because all along, God had been telling them, this is the results of your activities. This is the results of your sin. Like, if you keep this up, if you keep jumping on the couch, somebody's going to get hurt. If you keep disobeying me, I'm not going to protect you. Even though you're rich, even though you're powerful, even though you've taken over the whole land, if you keep this up, you're going to get captured by someone else. And so when Hananiah says, nope, you'll be back in 2 years, business as usual, he's not just saying, hey, I have a different opinion than Jeremiah. He's saying God is wrong about this whole you're going to be in captivity thing. Like, it doesn't matter. Your actions don't matter. It's going to be fine. You're going to be just fine. In fact, it reminds me a lot of the story we've seen in the last week. I was thinking about that. It's one thing to believe in lies. I mean, clearly it's not true that sexual persuasion meant, that was a hateful word a week ago. But I was also like, oh, wait a minute. Like, not only are people in our world trying to convince us to believe in lies, I mean, that's just marketing. But there's a deeper issue here. And I don't care. I mean, I'm not going to say that. I do care about the Supreme Court, but for the sake of this sermon, that's not my point. And for the sake of this sermon, I care about the election. I keep saying that because I don't want you to think I'm not connected. I am. But I don't think that's the most important thing here. But we're also in a nation where we don't know who to believe. We're exiles. And God said we're exiles. And we're living in a nation where not only are we trying to be persuaded to believe lies, but to rebel against what we know about God. I mean, at the heart of this, it's about, like, do we believe what God's word said? What God said? Like, do I believe, as Jesus taught, that in the beginning God created male and female, and then he brought them together in marriage, and as the marriage ceremony says, what God has put together, let no man tear apart. And that God's plan for male and female is that they join together as one, they have sex, they make babies, they make grandbabies, they populate the earth. Now, it's not my deal to police everyone who's outside of the faith. In fact, Paul warned against it. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to believe the lie that that is what God intended. I don't, and I won't. And I don't care if you change the word in the dictionary. I don't care if that becomes the law of the land. I don't care if I have to or I'll not be tax exempt. Don't care, not going to do it because that's not what God said. God said a man and a woman get married, have babies, become one flesh, and that is the building block for society. So how do we, if you advance the slide, how do we deal with this as exiles? Because we're in the same position that these guys were, and in fact, New Testament tells us again and again that's true, that we're exiles. We don't really belong here. Like, on one hand, we belong here because we're living in this time just like them. They were in Babylon. Their whole deal was to pray for their city. Their whole deal was like, if the city goes well, then you go well. Well, I've thought of some things I think that might help us from this story. Because I think we're in the same position. Like, we're trying to be, everybody's trying to persuade us to believe lies. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is sort of every nudge from our culture right now is, what the senator said to Amy Barrett Coney Jackson. No, Barrett Jackson. She said that's an outdated idea. That's incorrect and that's hateful. And that's a lot of what we're hearing about what God said about sexuality, about gender, about morality, about the whole not lying thing. All of those things, like those are outdated ideas according to our culture. And so what do we do? What do we do when everything that we read, and it's so tempting just to flip the board over and go, I don't want to play anymore. But that's not going to be good for our world. And I pray that doesn't happen. But we're getting there because no one can believe anyone. I think that's bad grammar, but that's what's happening. And so I have 3 ideas from this. And the first thing is, let's not believe. Let's be very careful that we don't just believe what we want to believe. I mean, think about that situation we had. Like, if you were a captive living in Babylon, which model sounds more... which one sounds better to you? Which one sounds better to you? I'll tell you, I like the 2 years and I'm home and business as usual and Babylon's destroyed and we're awesome. I don't like the other one where God says you're going to live here for 70 years. You're going to have to work hard. You're going to have to, you're going to have to rebuild. And then you're going to have to cart it all back in 70 years. But, oh, by the way, you'll be dead. And here's another thing. And I don't think we do enough of these as humans, let alone Christians. What Jeremiah pointed out is these prophets had been wrong a million times. Like they kept saying, oh, don't worry about it. God's fine with you. You're going to be okay. You're not going to get captured. And then they got captured. He's like, and I think we have to start holding people accountable too. Like, I'm not going to believe the third model from the same person that's different. Like, I'm not going to just keep believing when they go, oh, but we got a new science. I'm pro-science because science is about experimentation and discovering the truth. What it doesn't mean is everything a scientist says is science. So if people are wrong a lot, after a while I'm going to go, buddy, I'm not going to believe you at this time. And finally, I want to challenge you. And this is going to seem like work, but I think it's something so powerful for Christians. Because here's the thing, we have an advantage that no one else has. Because I just told you, it feels like we should just flip the board because everybody's cheating, everybody's lying. Like, he's got a 16-sided dice, and she throws the dice on the floor. And someone has like, how come there's 2 Park Place? Both people own Park Place. There must be another board game that somebody bought. It's like, this is not a fair game. I don't want any part of it. Here's the thing, Christian, we have an advantage. Because, see, as a somewhat intelligent person, I have ideas. I don't believe what our culture says right now where it says you are absolutely locked in your sexual persuasion. Oh, can't say that because that's now wrong. But it said it's inviolate, like meaning you can never change that. Like you're locked in from birth. Like your pants will fly off if you're near a person of that same sex, if you have same-sex attraction, and your pants will fly off. I mean, you can't even help it. You'll just fall on top of them if you have, opposite sex attraction. You can't change it. You don't choose anything about that, but you can completely change your gender if you want, twice maybe. I don't believe that. As a human, I don't believe that. It's annoying to me. But here's the thing. I could be wrong. Because somebody smarter will say, no, that's old-fashioned, Don. That's not true. And you don't even have a college education. Why would you believe that? And so I could be confused. I could think, like, I don't know. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm old-fashioned wrong. I'm from Missouri, for God's sake. What do I know? But here's the thing you and I have. And I want to finish with this. I want Mike to come back up. Don't ever be persuaded by someone. Don't believe the lies of someone who tries to get you to rebel against God. You should check out what I say. You might want to Google it twice. You might want to look it up in your encyclopedia in the book. Make sure it's not been changed. Because I could be wrong. But man, God has a very, very good track record at being right since he created this whole thing. But here's the problem. We don't live very long. One thing we forget is when Ezra wrote the words about King Cyrus, Jeremiah was dead. Hananiah had been long dead. All the people who heard Jeremiah's original words were dead. Like, we don't live long enough as humans to see how right God is. They all died thinking they were never going to be rescued, or at least just hoping they'd be rescued. So please, please, like, what do we do? Don't flip the board over. Don't quit the game yet. That's our list for this week. Like, as exiles, as Christians, don't flip the Monopoly board yet, please. But don't believe things just because you want to believe them. That's dangerous. Don't believe things from people who are wrong again and again and again. Check their record. I think that's fair. And man, don't ever believe someone who wants you to rebel against God. It's a lie. Let me pray. Dear Jesus, God, we need wisdom. It's such a weird world. There's always been times where lies were told. And this is not the worst time to be alive. We're so grateful. We're so blessed. We're so comfortable. But God, we do have a real lack of truth in our world. And God, it's so difficult to know what's right and what's wrong. Because we could be persuaded pretty easily to believe lies. And God, the proof changes right in front of our face. And we feel a little crazy sometimes. But God, as Christians, I pray that you would help us believe you. God, give us the strength and the faith just to stand up and go, no, I'm not going to rebel against God. And God, we are going to trust you and trust that you are right even when we are wrong. In your name we pray. Amen.
You're the center of the universe. Everything was made in you, Jesus. The breath of every living thing. Everyone was made in you. Sing again. You're the center of the universe. You're the center of the universe. Everything was made in you, Jesus. Breath of every living thing. Everyone was made from you. Hold everything. You hold everything together. You hold everything together. Oh Christ, be the center of our lives. Be the place we fix our eyes. Be the center of our lives. Oh Christ, be the center of our life. Be the place we fix our eyes. Be the center of our life. You're the center of the universe. You're the center of the universe. Everything was made in you, Jesus. Breath of every living thing. Everyone was made in you. You hold everything. You hold everything together. You hold everything together. You hold everything. You hold everything together. You hold everything together. Oh Christ, be the center we fix alright. Be the center of our life. So Christ, be the center of our life. Be the place we fix alright. Be the center of our life. And we lift our eyes to heaven. We lift our eyes to heaven. We wrap our lives around your life. Yeah, we lift our eyes to heaven, to you. Sing that again. We lift our eyes. We lift our eyes to heaven. We wrap our lives around your life. Yeah, we lift our eyes to heaven, to you. Yeah, we lift our eyes. Yeah, we lift our eyes to heaven. We wrap our lives around your life, yeah. We lift our eyes to heaven, to you. Turn your eyes and turn your eyes upon Jesus and look for in his wonderful grace. And the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace.
Wow, that was awesome. Mike said at warm-ups, he said, boy, I think a little bit of violin in my song would sound really good. Agreed. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm Bill. A couple announcements before we get going there. Recap last Tuesday was Dudes Day, and that rolls around every second Tuesday of the month, so next month, second Tuesday. Also, Ladies' Night was Sunday, and again, that rolls around the third Sunday of every month, so that'll be coming around. But tonight, we got Youth Night, and I heard there's going to be costumes and food, and it'll be a good time. So junior high schoolers, invite your friends, man. Come on out and have a good time. Mike and Heather do a great job with that. We always say invite, invest, and get involved. This happens because you invite your friends, you invite your family. Please do that. Invest your money. We have boxes out there online. You can swipe a card, so that's important. Invest in your time, too. Just get involved, set up, tear down. The kids area needs help, that sort of thing. So, we appreciate you being here. Hope your football team wins today, except it's Cleveland, and have a good day. All righty.